Hey folks, welcome to Project Gamma. At Project Gamma, we have smart conversations with smart people across entrepreneurship, technology, and cybersecurity. My name is Warner Moore. I'm a technologist and security leader who helped build multiple business-to-business software as a service companies who's passionate about modern cybersecurity practices. I'm also the founder of Gamma Force. At Gamma Force, we help tech and health tech companies with cybersecurity strategy by acting as their fractional security organization. Today, I'm excited to have Rob Zwink with us here. Rob has a deep career as a technologist where he went from software engineer to director at corporate Chase Bank. It doesn't get much more corporate than that. He ended up establishing himself as an expert engineer in Chase. In 2010, that was 48 people of 45,000. Not many expert engineers in Chase, which let him do all sorts of cool things, cool skunkworks projects, including applying blockchain to solve financial problems at scale. Rob took that experience and joined as CTO and co-founder of a blockchain startup where they got funding and were working to use blockchain to solve problems for the real estate title industry. And he never looked back, where among his current entrepreneurial endeavors, he's still focused on solving the real estate title problem as co-founder and CTO of Razi. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks for having me, Warner. And as you went through your own intro, I wanted to call out how much I appreciate your passion for community building that comes through in all of our various meetups and chats. So thank you, Warner.
Oh, thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. I mean, that's what life's all about, right? Doing cool things with cool people. And community is a great platform for that. So, one of the cool things about your background, Rob, is you're quite early in applying blockchain to solve real problems. Your first work applying blockchain was back in 2017, at least with the Safe Chain startup. What are your thoughts on applying blockchain to solve real problems?
When I was at JPMorgan, blockchain was hitting the majority of headlines, and a lot of the experience I had over the 13 years that I worked there, five of them were with mainframe computers. And I had a appreciation through that experience with the journey of different types of databases, from sequential databases to relational databases. There was document data stores. So when a brand new database type comes out, decentralized database, effectively, I uh, spent a lot of time thinking about where could it go next. I mean, it was a clear application for like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but where would it go next? Through the experience with applying it in residential real estate title, I think what I really grew to appreciate is that while there are trade-offs in every architecture decision, I hadn't fully appreciated just how expensive the application of blockchain would be. And the main reason I would say expensive is that there are 3,000 counties in the U.S., or over 3,000 counties, and each county has its own recorder, auditor, clerk of courts, engineer. And when you think about how maybe ideal that could be for a decentralized network of persistent data. There's also like all of the nodes, the management of the nodes, the power that is required to if you're using like a proof of work algorithm, and all of that complexity is effectively traded off for trust of essential utility. And many of those utilities, like the county recorder, need and require trust to operate. So I think the short answer to where I think when I think about blockchain these days is that it still has like any viable technology and application. I think as one considers where to apply it as a technology, one has to really factor in the complexity and the cost, which in the sort of fun of the late 2010s, that was lost on a lot of people. It was kind of it's a you know a hammer in search of a nail. And I think that many of those nails just don't warrant the expense. So I think one day there could be a auditor or recorder application of blockchain, I think it'll come at a fairly significant expense.
Yeah, I've always appreciated the tech of blockchain way more than crypto. Sorry, folks in the audience who love their cryptocurrency. I mean, that's fun in its own right, but blockchain as a ledger and as a record is really interesting. And I interesting context you bring up too, around the cost, right? In this case, it's going to be compute, right? Now that I think about it, the technology problems we're solving right now, at least the leading technologies we're using, blockchain, AI, Gen AI, these are really expensive tech, compute-wise. And for years, CRUD apps, SaaS, we weren't doing very computational stuff to solve many business problems.
Yeah, and I mean, and as you're saying it too, it's like work near the Ohio Supercomputer Center, and a few years ago, I had an opportunity to tour it, and the sheer amount of processing power at a supercomputer center, and then how that now kind of packs neatly into an NVIDIA H100, and if you multiply that times the number you can fit into a supercomputer center, I mean, our compute capacity is incredible. It's amazing, in 2025, and the idea that uh things are expensive. We are choosing to do expensive things like LLMs and AI generated videos and images, and sealing blocks for the purpose of, peer to peer transfer of value. There is an opportunity to apply that in like government space for residential real estate. I think I could describe and kind of detail what that vision could be. I think that just, yeah, the sheer complexity and cost requires a go-to-market strategy that is still very expensive. Like even just to kind of get something meaningful in market is 30 million more to do. So I identify these days as a bit of a blockchain skeptic, not because I don't believe the technology works, because it clearly works. I think the skepticism comes more from the narrow application, or maybe the like naivety that can come with not fully appreciating how the trade-off when you're implementing something that requires a third party you trust versus is it worth having a solution that doesn't require that trusted third party. And I think these days, residential real estate is something I think is almost biological or something. It's like you know, if somebody's messing around with my car, I'll like call the cops. If somebody comes to my front porch, I mean, it's like your hands start to get a little sweaty thinking about it. It's like it's a biological response. It's my home, and the institutions we've created to kind of protect this concept of ownership of those homes from like creating 3,000 counties and refusing kind of federal recorder systems that manage deeds. It's all very interesting. There's a lot of inefficiency in the process of residential real estate transactions, like that is almost baked in order to protect that independence. So creating technology solutions for that industry, began with the application of blockchain as an emerging technology. And where I'm at today is more around interviewing title offices, interviewing the people who work at real estate title insurance underwriters. They are effectively the stewards of a $30 billion a year business. And how can I develop software that can reduce operational inefficiency, improve automation, create opportunities for lower costs for consumers that creates an opportunity for homes to be more liquid. The idea of refinancing, and thinking about the percentages you have to pay to do that. If we can lower that, make it easier to buy and sell homes, it's an interesting problem to. It's complicated enough to keep one busy who enjoys solving problems.
And that's what I love about you, Rob. It's like you're about as nerdy as they get as far as technologists go. You're incredibly smart when it comes to technology problems, but you're grounded enough in that was startup businesses. These businesses, we're trying to solve business problems, right? So being able to put that technologist hat on, but frame it in a way in the businesses we're building that we are creating value for the market for the problem we're trying to solve for them. So you learned a bunch about the title industry with SafeChain, and now you're taking that learning and building Razi. What's new with Razi?
Yeah, I would say even as outline that journey at Chase, we would put together PowerPoint presentations, and there was always someone who would say, we need to create a slide that shows the ROI. And these would be for internal tech build efforts. And it was always kind of confusing. Almost, 13 years, it was still like felt like an afterthought to think about, well, the cost and the reward and how do we really rate that? I mean, these aren't revenue generating projects. These are efficiency gains within like a giant institution. Um, Whereas with a tech startup, like the ROI is everything. I mean, you need to be able, you need to know, like, well, I'm going to send somebody to Colorado conference for $1,800. How many sales are they going to bring back, or what's the relationship value? So I think that even from the early days of after leaving Chase, I was still naive in that front. Coming into a tech startup, we were able to raise a reasonable seed round for the Central Ohio. We had some early successes and wins with revenue generating products, but I feel like I had to learn early and the hard way just how important it is to keep an eye on the product you're building. Are you solving a real problem? So after SafeChain, I ended up as CTO and co-founder or CTO of a fintech in Minneapolis called ClickSwitch, and all ClickSwitch did was help you switch your bank from one bank to another by switching your direct deposit. Um, they sold each switch for $25. They sold the company for $90 million. It was a clear need. Banks loved it. Banks loved the ability to gain a primary account relationship. Like that's what they wanted. They wanted your direct deposit so that they could sell you auto loans and credit cards. And comparing the experience of SafeChain to ClickSwitch, my partner at Razi, we looked at it and said, well, what did we learn? And we're like, let's find a business problem and title and solve that. Let's interview, let's, essentially assess our target market. We'll take the sort of product management discipline that we've learned through all of this experience, thanks to the folks we got to work with, and made Razi more of a less of a less of a moonshot, more of a let's grow with revenue by building software for an industry based on the specific needs they have right now. um, I think there's room for both of those types of companies. Don't get me wrong, like building a peer-to-peer system for residential real estate transactions. So if I own my house outright and you want to buy cash, why don't we just take care of this right now on our mobile phones is amazing. Um, that said, interviewing a title office owner down the street and saying, hey, what are your, challenges? And if you can sell something to them for $20 a month and multiply that times 6,000 title offices in the US, like that became more of our focus, which I've enjoyed that transition.
Hmm. Yeah, I like how you're reframing your entrepreneurial journey, at least with one of your latest startups, Razi, thinking about, oh, well, what problem is being solved for the market? Will they pay for it? And less about technology looking for a problem to solve. It's
Exactly.
looking for a market with a problem to solve. Uh, Makes a much better business. So in your career, you've been all about taking and applying innovative technology to solve real business problems. I take it for granted that folks with deep expertise, like yourself, often have non-traditional backgrounds. Share about some of your career journey as a technologist.
Oh, I'd love to. And I for such a long time, it was a part of my like professional personal identity that I'd had one quarter of college, and these days now that feels so long ago. So it's fun to talk about this journey because it's been a while since I've thought about it. But I grew up in Marion, Ohio. The last 2 years of high school, I went to Tri Rivers Career Center and got a vocational certificate in electronics. So if you need your VCR cleaned or the bands on your cassette tape replaced, you can call on me. The I came to the big city, Columbus, Ohio, and I got a job as a waiter at the Continent, BG Salvies. I'm decided that this time I'm going to work in the front of the restaurant and learn to talk to people, and I was a horrible waiter. So I ended up back in tech, repairing laptop computers, and for the company that owns Micro Center. So I stayed with Micro Center, walk-in tech support, laptop computer repair. I ended up at their home office, and I worked on microcenter.com for 5 years when it transitioned from being a brochure website to e-commerce. And I remember the day we went live, the essentially the executive sponsor of Micro Center was surprised that it did as well as a store. And that was a surprise for everyone. They didn't think that it was going to be as successful as a store. And that opened my eyes to kind of the capability of what the internet brings to brick and mortar. And I'm so glad that Micro Center has weathered all these years. And I joke that if they had like church service, I'd probably attend. I love Micro Center. So the point of that story is that was with like a quarter of Columbus State. I essentially had stopped going to Columbus State, and when I got my job at JPMorgan, um, I'd had a career, and at that point in software engineering that was largely applied. It was through being self-taught, and was also something that I kind of got tired of identifying with the absence of a college degree. So I ended up over the course of 11 years getting a computer science bachelor's from Franklin University, and appreciated that. I was glad to sit through like a discrete math class or calculus and be older and appreciate it. It was a great way to spend the early years of my uh, first kid, and getting away and nerding out on more classical education. And then I would just put a bow on it with I feel like the journey through applied technology to later learning more of the discipline around how computer algorithms are made to be more efficient, or the difference between discrete mathematics and calculus, led me to a better appreciation for creating software. And that I generally, and maybe very early on, was a fan of agile software delivery, being kind of hands on keys and not being afraid to break something. There are times when using engineering as like, say you're building a bridge, you should take the time and get your plans and have your requirements, and the design should be specific. But when you're building software, it's okay to build things early, fail fast, potentially break things. And and that was something that was an interest very early. So I would say then, yeah, the non-traditional background was more around I don't know if these days how non-traditional that is. So as I've talked to people, especially who entered in around the same time I did, which would be the, I guess, mid to late 90s, there's a lot of folks with music degrees and no degrees or math degrees, or few. I think a lot of the people who went to, say, Ohio State around that time for computer science learned a, a computer programming language that wasn't actually used at in business. It was like a OSU specific computer programming language. And I always sort of felt like they ended up leaving college burned out with programming, where, I get to go home and wire up my LAN and play Quake and listen to Deftones and figure out how DNS works. And so I still, I think, carry that enthusiasm for technology, and that it's, very much self-directed. And I'm glad I get paid to do it.
I built my first 10 base 2 network for Doom. I think as a up to 10 base T by the time Quake was out, but
Hmm.
it was hub. It wasn't switch, so that 10
Nice.
megabit was a shared bandwidth network.
Oh man. Yeah, I remember the apartment on East Blake when we got Roadrunner cable modem installed for the first time, and it just blew my mind, you know?
Oh yeah, we're so spoiled these days. The first time I got a gigabit internet connection in my house. I was just besides myself, and
Yeah.
my local network is 10 gigabit, right? No, that's a nerdy thing to do, right? But
Uh-huh.
it just illustrates how far technology has come. We take it for granted these days.
But it does take a special person to like want to find a large file to download just so you can watch it download.
It's funny. I have like when I transfer files to across my network, I have witch hats, bandwidth lag and spikes, and it's because the hard drive that it's being copied to can't. Uh, it's not as fast as the network. uh,
Nice.
yeah, it's your point. Like when you started your career, right? I introduced it as non-traditional, but you're so right. I think of it as typical, right? The typical background of technologists of a certain generation is atypical, or
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, it is in hindsight, like in the moment, like I suppose like many people you talk to I felt like a outsider, you know, the imposter. But I was still pretty good programmer. So, and then in hindsight, I'm realizing like pretty much everybody had the same kind of perspective. So yeah, it's been good for that reason.
I can't cite this quote. I forget where the origin is, but I'll paraphrase it. It's like. We are no better than anyone else in the room, and we are no worse than anyone else in the room. I think that's important to remember for everyone to remember, right? The you mentioned algorithms, and you reminded me of a book I don't commonly cite, but I think is particularly interesting. At least it was for me as a technologist. It's called Algorithms to Live By.
Mm.
And it's really just talking about computer science algorithms and how they apply to decision making in our life. And it's really interesting book.
Hmm. Yeah, I have two that would come to mind in that category. One is patterns and anti-patterns and change management, which just had a very interesting structure for how to communicate like what works and what doesn't work in a book form. And I don't necessarily I didn't necessarily use it as a reference guide, but I did use the structure for it for like sort of architecture style work while at Chase. Like I liked the idea of focusing more on things like anti patterns, like what to look for and how to find them, and then when you find them, you know what to do about them. And then another book was by Martin Fowler called Patterns in Enterprise Architecture, which, as I think about the future, specifically to you know the application of AI within the industry of software engineering, and receiving a question like, what does it mean to tech elevator or to a computer science degree, or like what does it mean to people entering the industry? I think things like patterns in enterprise architecture, like when to use a message queue or when to use a relational database, when to use a blockchain database, like, when to use a high performing search index like Elasticsearch. I think being able to answer those questions are way more important than, using BlueJ to program Java without the benefit of you know, automatic formatter or linting or so there's I think a shift coming where it's hopefully will happen quickly because right now I feel somewhat overwhelmed by the amount of interesting projects that business leaders are able to essentially deliver a very high fidelity prototype using tools like Lovable. They create these React based, they're programming for the first time and they're like, hey, can you finish this? And it's not anywhere, it's like 1/5 of the work you'd have to do to get to like $10,000 MRR, So I think having people coming out of school with the ability to take a React app and apply patterns in order to like build a business that can get to, some kind of revenue versus focusing on like where the semicolon goes, um, will be an interesting. I see that the need, and I could see the transition, and it's in many ways part of that journey from 1996 to today is how things have changed.
Yeah, I love that. And that context, I think, is so important, right? We can prototype faster, right? But if we want to scale this product, well, what got us there won't get us there.
Mhm.
Another book around architect, because as far as tech books go, those were always my favorite tech books to read, and the more high level, because tech, I'd rather read a man page for the tech that's changing every day, but the architecture and the patterns are more lasting. And a book for that is related is called Web Operations, and it's more
Okay.
for like scale distributed computing platforms and things with big websites is there is no one way to do it, right?
Hmm.
There are a lot of ways to solve similar problems and viable ways. And the book is all about exploring different architectures that were scaled with different tech companies. Really solid book.
Cool. Yeah, I through the while at JPMorgan, I got a certification from Carnegie Mellon in enterprise software architecture. And I would say the primary tenet of that certification is trade-off analysis and being able to articulate non-functional requirements. So I think to your point around there's many ways to do like many ways to build a system. I think knowing which it's almost like you have to pick, both of these will work. How do you know which one to choose? And being able to do that in a systematic way feels like engineering, and it can be done in a way that's methodic. And I have and still do that type of decision making at a startup too. Sometimes the non-functional requirement is time to market. If you don't get it out fast enough, everybody has to go home. So if you can get it out fast enough in a way that like is going to be something you're proud of like 5 years from now, like how do you make those decisions where in 5 years you may be willing to swap it out with something else. So that fortunately, as I'd kind of talked about my early career, I've never been somebody who's like, it has to be perfect or I'm not going to work on it. Like I feel like I'm willing to kind of get in and, you know, create things and make things and see how they work. But at the end of the day, being able to balance that with, something you're proud of 3 to 5 years later, um, is, can be a discipline.
I wrote that down. If you can't get it out fast enough, everyone has to go home. Well, Rob
Yeah.
Zwink.
Nice.
That's a great line. Well, you're talking about building things, and I love all the entrepreneurial irons you have in the fire, and they're all tied to building something meaningful. Of all things, you created a vending machine to sell libations. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So VendGuard is a company that has now three different kinds of devices that enable a vending machine to sell age-restricted products. So the three different devices have varying degrees of uh, essentially biometrics. So for example, there's a vending machine at a local brewery called Land Grant where you can place your ID on a glass tray. It'll read the PDF 417 barcode. It'll do optical character recognition on the top. It'll compare the data in the barcode to the data on the top. It'll then find the largest face on the top because there's two faces, like a tiny little face and a big face. And then it'll look for a person in the front facing camera to ensure that they're on the ID. And that happens in 400 milliseconds.
Hmm.
And if because there's actually a IBM or a Lenovo ThinkStation T1000, which is some like NVIDIA 4 GB VRAM. So it's GPU offloaded and pretty high tech. And if all of those things are true, this old Pepsi machine with custom logos on it, custom graphics, will operate like a normal vending machine. Um, when I started that project with two co-founders, you know, I certainly like went immediately to my JPMorgan days, I'm like, hey, I like this idea. Like I like the idea of like often an opportunity to join software engineering with hardware. Like I learn a ton as a professional whenever I do that. I'm like excited about this to do in my garage, but like I don't want to do it if it is illegal. So we really spent the initial part just understanding the compliance requirements. We built a matrix of every like Ohio law in Ohio, how our system could have a technology control in place to comply with that. And then we worked with lobbyists. We met with various state level organizations. I mean, all the while like building this prototype that took 2 minutes round trip to do the verification. And so as we've been honing this now over 2 years, we have an opportunity to put 10 of these machines at the shoe. So, or the shoe, which is the Ohio State Stadiums, which is one of the largest stadiums in the US, if not the world. And
And college football, the shoe is a big deal.
oh man. So yeah, so we have five different beer vendors who will have their graphics on the machines, and we're actually using Ohio's mobile driver's license technology instead of the biometric capability, in that this will allow the user of the vending machine to essentially activate their smartphone with their own thumbprint, so it kind of takes the biometric risk and moves it out of the machine. And that is also like silly fast. You essentially walk up like you would pay with your credit card, double click, activate the driver's license, tap it. You get a success message, and then the machine will operate as a normal vending machine, but in this case, selling beer. So, um, as in thinking about the application of emerging technologies within just like almost like normal businesses, that was a very satisfying project because, as I mentioned, I mean, the computer behind the scenes of this old Pepsi machine at land grant is $1,200 computer, just not a lot of money, but that said, it's like a decent little book size computer that has some advanced facial recognition and optical character recognition and barcode scanning and identification, and then the mechanical aspect of activating the buttons. All of that's like in a small bundle that can then be activated. And then with this, the mobile driver's license tech, Ohio's been able to do that just within the last few years. And so it's exciting to be part of a project that's introducing, ideally, you won't see these in bars where, you sit and interact with the bartender and get to enjoy the community around it. But, if you're at a place that needs that scaling, say at halftime, you don't want to necessarily wait for, you're not there to strike up a conversation. And it feels like an opportunity to sell more beer and reduce wait times, add some customer delight when it comes to these machines look cool. And so yeah, that's an exciting one too. VendGuard.
Love that. Move fast and break things, but don't go to jail.
Yeah. Well said. That's what that was, I suppose, one of the big lessons at JP Morgan when I first started. I mean, I was still a bit of a, I don't know the right word, maybe rebellious or something. Like I was working in a mainframe department and I was, programming Java programs, which is, like back in 2000, what, four, that's like, no one ran Java on mainframes. And then I feel like I was able to do some interesting things by kind of questioning assumptions. Like I connected IBM DB2 to IMS over like a Java bridge, and that was interesting to people. And I feel like I always was somewhat swimming upstream. And then in 2010, when I went through this expert engineer program, um, I feel like I had a better appreciation for the complexity of a large organization and how to maybe learn the rules, play by those rules, win the game by playing by the rules. And that's when I was able to, effectively like work through the promotion cycle. And, when I left JP Morgan, I had was leaving a, perfectly reasonable job. I think as I think about one of those things I learned was to where one can like innovate and question assumptions, challenge authority, but there's also moments where when it comes to compliance, like if you can demonstrate through a matrix, like here's what you asked me to do and here's how I'm doing it, it's so much easier than like I'm not going to do it and I'm going to change your expectation for it. So for the state of Ohio specifically, I mean, we invested a lot of time, energy, money into figuring out how to comply. And when we did, and I feel like that was probably in some ways one of the innovations. It was yeah, it was very satisfying.
Hmm, that's great. So Rob Zwink, the person who left a perfectly reasonable job to enter the startup space. Share your closing thoughts. Anything you'd like to leave the audience with as we wrap up?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. I'm fortunate to. I feel like as I go to these various network events, there's moments where I see people kind of making beelines to the folks they're most comfortable talking to, and I feel like we often end up in those situations. So, thanks also for being my friend over the years. And yeah, from a parting thoughts perspective, I love programming. I love technology. I love the application of innovation within existing business process problems. I'm fortunate to work with a number of people who share that enthusiasm. And yeah, I guess as I look back, some of the places I left, like be it Marion or microelectronics or JPMorgan, had a degree of gravity that I needed some inertia. And as I have left the gravity of those places, it's been awesome. So while it's been a journey, yeah, I'm glad. And for many of the people I talk to, they're in situations where they'd like to do something similar. They'd like to leave a big company and do startups. I mean, it's been hard, and maybe I suppose in final thoughts, feel free to reach out. I'm based here in Columbus, Ohio, Rev One Ventures, and you can come by. That's where my office is, at the Rev One Ventures Lab. Feel free to shoot me a note, and I'll be glad to continue the conversation. So, thank you, Warner.
My pleasure, Rob. Thanks for being here. If folks want to reach out, how should they do that? Email, LinkedIn, show up at the Revel One Labs office?
Yeah, any of those would work. I suppose the easiest one would be look me up on LinkedIn, Robert Zwink. I'm the only one as far as I know. So yeah, just add me, message me. You can find me pretty easily online, or maybe my bio for your podcast will include contact info. That works too.
All right, great. Well, thanks again, Rob, and thank you, all of you, for listening to Project Gamma, presented by GammaForce.io. If you've enjoyed this podcast, check us out on your favorite podcast platform to catch future episodes.